Okay, welcome everyone to the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of November 14th, 2023. Just a reminder to the public that you can be present in the council committee room, and also you can join us via Zoom, and the Zoom link is posted on the agenda on our City Trail website. Today we are starting off with the general governance finance report. We'll be talking about the 2024 water sewer budget. And I will hand it over to CAO McClure at this time.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Good to see everybody here today. I know that for me, it's been a lot of learning since the last time we met and went through kind of rather quickly. It was December 20th. So again, still not even about 11 and a half or 10 and a half months ago that we were here doing this before. But we're getting back into more of a calm and a standard that we should be talking about utilities in this time frame. So this is should be our time that you should be expecting to see our first go at utility rates. I don't know if you know some of the staff that we have here today. Craig Spears, he's our utility superintendent. We have Ben Grizzly Jones, he's on our I want to say not architects, they're engineer side or engineering tech side. So forgive me, and I think that you probably know most of the council, both of you, so I won't go with that. So we have a number of documents to go through today, and I know that where we're at today may bring out some questions, and that's why we have the ability to answer those questions, and we've got a bit more time to get back answers for council or even look at options, those sorts of things. So today is just sort of a kind of your first draft of where I'm seeing and wanting to discuss some of the options that are available to council. And I also want to be able to get your feedback on what you think and what direction you want council, want staff to move in. I know that we've got the team here ready to do the water and sewer, but I thought we might tackle what is, known as the environmental services, which is sort of just a nice way to say garbage and resource collection. And I've got I'm going to share my screen on that. So I assume that all of you have the document. I will share my screen there. You're allowed to do that, Mr. Chairman. Once we get so that I take over here.
Yep. Yeah, you have stop that.
Apologize.
Yeah, there you
go. So quite a year of transition when we talk about environmental health services. And as much I believe as one tries to get out and communicate to the public, many people maybe didn't understand how quickly it was happening and what was happening. So we'll go a bit over that today, but I think it's really important for the community to understand what an increased level of service they are now receiving from what we have currently been providing. At the City of Trail, you get your garbage picked up every week. Recycling is every 2 weeks. When we went in and worked with an agreement with RDKB, now this is something that had been talked about, had been planned for a number of years, and the biggest component of that was the organics, trying to get the organics out of our garbage. And I know that people might say, well, I do my own composting, but many people do not. The other big factor is that we have the McKilbrey landfill. If we have to replace that, the amount of money that is going to cost us, not only to find a new location, but again, to transport to somewhere else, it's not like there's some sort of readily available spot. So anything that we can do to be able to extend the life of that, I think is invaluable to all the city and businesses of the area. And that's also, again, when I say the area, yes, of course, we'll focus on the City of Trail, but we're all part of our partners here with our East Side Summit. And all of them have been part of, and gave the direction through the RDKB to take this on. And that was to take on the RDKB Organics division. So they got some grants, they would do the buckets and different things. It became very clear that it made no sense, not only financially, but just even environmentally, to have another truck driving every week to come and pick up your organics. So the discussion was held. Okay, so you've got a contract to be able to pick up your garbage. What if we had a truck that could pick up both your garbage and your compost at the same time? Yes, you're going to get weekly pickup because we know that we need to get the organics out there. So you're not losing service on that. And of course, the recycling vehicle will be by every other week. But that seemed a lot better, I think, for council financially, for the in our area as well as environmentally, not having per week at maybe 3 trucks and other weeks 2. So the decision was made to join RDKB and to hand over the curbside collection of garbage, but also the organics program rolling. And I will say that it was bumpy at the beginning, but that's not uncommon. When you make a change that someone has been used to for a long time, these things are going to happen. So I wanted to just kind of lay that out for the community and for council members that might get asked those questions. And we'll go through a few of these slides. I think that this is a pretty straightforward one. And that's why I'm kind of starting off with the easy stuff. Sort of like we're back at school. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is where did we end up in 2023? We had a budget of $513,000 for revenue. Revenue came in at about 505. Again, the discount, 31,000. We're a bit higher in the discount, which we really do see that, especially because the discount, because of garbage is residential. So you're not always dealing with businesses because there is sort of a way of getting discount through the business side of things as well, or your media rate. But in particular, this one we know is a straight residential. And so we do see the residents tend to come in and pay on beforehand and get the discount. You'll notice that the revenue is lower than it should be. So again, some of those learning experiences for me. One is that we tend to have people that if they fit the rules, if the place that they have is vacant for more than 3 months, they're able to have a discount or a break on what the utility is. So that was one thing that came up. The other factor is that I noted when I was reversing my numbers that the numbers I had used per unit that I had included some properties that get a water service, but they do not get garbage pickup because they're commercial. So a bit of a mistake on my part there, but you can see that we're under. It's a combination of those two is why we're under on our revenue side. When you go down to collection, now this would be our contract with GFL. And you can see that the 176 compared to the budget of 234, pretty much bang on to 75%, or again, the 9 months of collection contract that we had. When you go down to tipping fees, we ended up being at about 70%. So not, our tipping fees, and that's again, when GFL goes and dumps the truck with our garbage in it, that is what we get charged by the RDKB for our tipping fees. And again, this is an area which will be under the microscope to see what happens with our numbers when we move from having organics out of the service. This will be one of those when people say, well, what was the difference? We should be able to see. It's going to take a bit of time, obviously, but this is an area where we're going to be able to get a sense on what that difference is making for our locations. So, and then the last two, spring cleanup, fall cleanup. It's sort of interesting that these are in here because they do tend to be a public works type of entity. Maybe should be maybe under taxation, and we'll talk a bit about that in a bit. Don't know if anybody has any questions on that, but very quickly you will see under the 2023 forecast, as expected, when you don't have 3 months worth of both the tipping fees and the collection happening that were budgeted for and paid for through rates, that you're going to have a surplus. And you can see that we're not quite $100,000 surplus. So we go to the next slide. This is what the 2024 to 2023 budget comparison. Now, when you look at it, obviously it makes a lot of sense that we don't have the collection, we don't have the tipping fees. Obviously, our utility rate needs to drop. because right now the only thing that we will be having to deal with is our spring and fall cleanups. You can see there at $25, and the correct numbers for units this year, that the 86,400 is the expectation of our fee revenue. We also, in around over 80 plus, people are paying before the discount date. So that's something that's important for council to be aware of, how many people take that. So even though you might think, hey, it's this amount, we can actually guarantee that it's less than that, because, well, at 80%, it's less than, are taking advantage of the discount. Down below, kind of very quickly, the math is just, here's what we're expecting for the spring cleanup expenses and the fall cleanup expenses. And then the one down in the bottom was me doing the math based on providing a $28.50 refund from 2023's annual utility bill. Now, someone might say, well, wait a second, I paid 147 or I paid 136, and if 25% of that is more than that. Except that what people are forgetting is that we've only removed out the portion that relates to collection. So the other portion is sort of in-house expenses carried through by the city, and that will continue on in the future. So I thought this was an important slide because it's been certainly quite interesting for me, because during that tumultuous time of changeover, I had a number of people come and see me, and we discussed what was happening. And part of it was I never got information, and they're like, well, did you look in the bottom of the green bin for the paperwork? And anecdotally, we heard from GFL that a lot of people found that those papers ended up in the first round of composting, sort of thing. So obviously people didn't look at the bottom of the bag. But what it really came to me after I talked to people is, and they said, well, this isn't fair, you're doing this. And you would explain, well, now we're going to have one truck picking up two products, we're saving money, we're doing this collectively. I said it didn't make sense for us to say, we'll go on our own, charge you even more money, and then have another truck that you're paying for through our RDKB to get your organics. So let's work together. And most people were very, very understanding. And in fact, many of them said, actually, when I've calculated my numbers, I'm actually going to pay less than what I was doing for my garbage collection. Okay, that is, if you're doing organics, based on how I change my behavior. And a couple of things here. The annual garbage rate collection. Now, this would have been 2023, and I also put one of those asterisks there because it was our contract was up in early of 2024 with GFL, so they had a fixed contract. We know because of fuel, labor, equipment, that fee was going up significantly. So I just to try to do the comparison, I had used the annual garbage rate as if the 2023 rates applied, and the garbage portion would have been about $113. Now, for that in trail, there was no incentivization to separate out your organics. It was just you paid your fee, you could put in your 2 bags of garbage. There is certainly incentivization under the RDKB. And again, first one I picked up is that at the $3 bag fee, if in using your organics, you were able to get down, and again, the bags have a certain weight. And I think before you could just kind of throw whatever, and I think people even now are making sure that they're getting as much as they can. But if you're down to 1 bag bi-weekly, so that's again going to be 2 bags a month, you would actually be savings of basically not quite $20 over the previous year if you're just doing the garbage. If you wanted to put out 1 bag per week, again, you would be at 173. So yes, that's an increase, but I also want to make that caveat that we know that our rates for both collection from GFL and also I know that there's changing rates coming for garbage for RDKB and the tipping fees as well. Again, more pushing that incentivization to use your compost for your house. And of course, if you wanted to say, look, I want the same I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, well, you can see that that's going to cost you 3 times as much as what you could be at or better if you were to make the effort to compost. Now, again, I understand that there's people get used to certain patterns or they pay for this, but again, it's not uncommon. Much like if you've got a hydro bill or if you've got a metered water, there's an incentivization to turn off the lights, to turn down the heat, not to make yourself freezing, but to make yourself comfortable, put a sweater on. You have a direct effect on what you will pay. And I really feel that is something that is happening here as the city joined the Side 7 as far as coming to an agreement on doing organics collection and doing it efficiently and cost effectively. Again, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'm sure that you know your group enough that if you do, you'll put your hand up or let me know. So just some budget notes. I'm proposing a utility fee for garbage for 2024 at $25. This based on what I expect the amount of discount to be will be enough to cover the spring and fall yard waste cleanup. I'm recommending to council that a credit of $28.50 be provided to refund for the 3 months of curbside collection that RDKB has undertaken. So yes, at $25 less your discount and your $28 credit fee, you'll actually, your utility bill overall will probably be down, you know, the $6 or $7 net kind of thing. Now again, you still got to pay for water and sewer. But I am suggesting that this would probably be the last year that we would have this in the utility fee because it doesn't really fit because we don't have curbside collection of organics, recycling, and garbage. That's all now being done by the RDKB. And I think that this fits more likely under that public works transportation budget where they do all kinds of cleanups, whether it's storm sewer and trees and different things like that. And that for the amount of the $80,000 that would come off the utility fee in 2025, we would just take that to taxes. So again, your utility fee for next year would be lower, but your taxes would pick that difference up. Also, just really wanted to give a big shout out to my staff. 9,500 RDKB garbage tags sold since late September. So again, about 5-6 weeks, and that's a lot of people. And some of them weren't always happy. I just have to let you know that they weren't always pleasant with staff, but the staff are excellent. So again, I tip my hat to our customer service reps that stand there and are polite and make sure that people have the service that they need. And again, we are providing quite a service to sell that many garbage tags. And I feel though, although it was a bumpy transition at the start, and I wouldn't have really expected anything any different. Could have hoped maybe another, you know, we could have had a video or a TikTok. I'm not on top of that sort of thing, but I'm not in, that's why I'm not in the communications coordinating side. But I truly believe that the city residents are adjusting nicely to the new RDKB curbside collection of organics and garbage. And I know that over time here, we will start to get some numbers that we would want to report back from the RDKB on what they are seeing, which I would hope because we track every month and have for lots of years what our tipping fees are from our collection. So very quickly, I think the truck should be, I don't necessarily know that a truck does something for, say, Warfield and then trail. I think it's a trail route, but we'll have to check on that. But it would be sort of those days of like, hey, you got to, can we compare apples to apples on, are people really taking advantage of doing the organics diversion? And we should be able to see that with some of the numbers that come from the tipping fees. So this one was pretty straightforward. Would hope to get some direction. It doesn't necessarily happen today, but would take some questions on anybody having concern about the proposed fee for 2024 and the credit being provided back. Councilor Martin.
I've had a conversation with some people who don't take part in the spring fall yard waste cleanup. Is that going to matter? What's one?
I don't know if it matters. And again, the same conversation can be is that I don't use a skating rink. I don't use the pool. My kids don't go to school anymore. Mm-hmm. Some of these things we generally have a fee for, and to be able to have the staff to be able to go by your place, that's the biggest cost. If you don't put something out, that's something that I think would be a benefit to them, and if they don't take advantage of it, I don't have the ability to find a way to say, well, this house here, don't pick up their house, pick up our house, sort of thing. So logistically, they would be very, very difficult.
Okay. That's the question.
It's understood.
I actually would just like to kind of speak to that further. Do you have an idea of how many houses do participate in that? I mean, regardless of whether it's that or the other, but on average, how many houses actually, through Public Works, if they're driving down a street, would they say 50%? Would they say, 5 houses on one street? How many people really use the service as a whole? Just something, just for background.
Good question.
I don't have any data on what that would be at this time, but, yeah, I think it's a majority of the folks that would use it.
Mm.
And why not? It's a service, saves you going to the dump yourself and disposing of all these items, so, yeah.
Just for perspective.
Yeah, I
that's
don't
all.
have any data on that.
But it's a great question, and that's something that we can anecdotally, I think, because I don't think we've got any in the truck going, you know, 1508 or
Mhm.
both. That's the thing, but it is a question that we will go back, look at and report back on the next time we talk about rates.
With the change, with the organics, do we have any, increased bear issues in the city this year?
Now, that's a great question, and I don't know if that's something that comes into City Hall or to our bylaw. Is that a usual first call if we have that, or is there conservation? And it's a great question. I don't know when we have bear issues, you know, who do they call?
I haven't heard any issues with the green bins
Okay,
at all.
okay,
But there was the usual.
Yeah.
You know, garbage strewn
yes,
as it always is at this time of year.
That would be a call to conservation.
just curious of,
Yeah, well, again, you could see, it would be interesting too, because we do work with Bearware, and that may be something, you know, a lot of times they're looking for their funding and what's
Yeah.
happening, and then maybe we could find out if there's any reporting from them on.
Yeah.
I do know that, for a while there were certainly certain residents that were unhappy, that their garbage didn't get picked up because it didn't have a tag. And or they missed the date because the schedule changed, and, I know that did result. Now, again, whether or not that's bears or if it's dogs, per se, but we did have a number of calls in that early time, that people had not, you know, had left their garbage out, had not picked it up. And I know that our bylaw officer had gone and just, you know, tried to work with the homeowner to say, you know, you need to take care of this. Isn't on the city. But I will see from Bearware whether you can get some numbers if there's any calls on additional calls because of, you know, in this time of year compared to the previous year, because it is fall. Yeah.
and if they had any like educational, like literature that we could put out for when it's this time of year and you have like your things up before you go to work.
Okay.
You'll probably see better data next year because of the time of year. Sleep pretty quick.
Councillor Martin, do you know how the regional district is with the sales of the bear bins? Is it mostly in Roslyn or?
I think there's not a lot in trail, and I have to be honest, I think they're not selling as many as they thought they were gonna sell.
Yeah.
So they're selling a few,
Uh-huh.
but people don't wanna spend $200 extra on a bear bin. That's the information I kind of picked up on.
Yeah.
I don't want to beat a dead horse about garbage or whatever right now, but just as perspective, do we send out a communications to individuals, like letting them know that those bins have to stay with the property? I only asked because I actually got a letter from Castlegar today on the house that I sold, reminding me that house, those bins have to stay with that house.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we do something the same or the RDKB does. But just actually, it was kind of a reminder going, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But a good thing to.
Yeah. So one thing I do know, is that the RDKB, they have a electronic tag to each one.
Mhm.
So your house has a certain unit, and that is in that can.
Mhm.
How exactly, I'm not 100% sure, but they can go by and they can tell if you've taken the neighbor's can or vice versa. And so I would expect that, you know, that communication I would hope would come from the RDKB as far as the green bin, because obviously you're able to look the bag or garbage can you have out, as far as that goes. But it would be, I know that they were definitely tracking that so that they were able to know that they dropped it off at the house and that it's related to that house.
Okay.
Now again, as far as communication goes, I don't know if they dropped off that this is supposed to be with your property.
It was just something I
Yeah.
got in the mail today. I went, oh, hey, this is good reminder.
Yeah, well, and again, not necessarily hearing that other people are, you know, here your trail residents recall getting that sort of letter, that communication, although it may have been in that.
It was in the official one.
Information,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
But maybe a reminder
Because I looked for the, yeah.
RDKB.
Somebody tried to sell their bins.
Yeah.
Facebook. Yeah, just put it up there. They didn't get away with it though.
People are fun. They're trying to get the $200 back to get there.
Yeah.
But I can ask RDKB what they're doing about that. Food business. Okay, I'm not kind of hearing anyone that's got any concerns with kind of where we're at with garbage, the fee and the credit at all.
I can support your proposal, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Is there a seconder to the?
I was just gonna say, do you think, so it's the $25 utility fee?
Yeah.
Which, is that what we would like call it?
Garbage fee. It's.
I'm just thinking, like, could we call it something other than garbage fee, just for the public to,
Yeah, I think that I think it's going to be called yard fees,
okay,
like on your bill.
okay,
So I think it's a
perfect.
great point. Yes, language wise, yes,
Yeah.
it's not. I think it does say yard waste pickup. Yes, and the other part of what we're doing here and wanting to kind of get this information is that being able to work with our software supplier to be able to have on the utility bill. Here's that yard and waste, and then here's that credit, so that it shows up on your bill, so that when you get your bill, now again, it would also have water and sewer on there. But it'll have a yard waste pickup, and then it'll have your credit for 2023.
And maybe have to highlight the credit highlighted so people know that they're getting it.
We will,
Previous,
again, we will do our best
yeah.
to communicate with people.
Yeah, I think people need to know that they are actually getting it.
And
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think that this is where you really also kind of count on, you know, our great medias that watch these types of meetings. You know, they can't always attend, but they do watch these, and then hopefully they're also be able to make sure that the public knows that it will be going up. Yeah.
But then next year allocating that $25 into.
Yes, but we will have that discussion
next
this
year.
time next year, because council might say, no, we like to have it. Because we don't know.
I'll second it.
Okay. So, do you want to do this all at the end when we get that all?
Again, really, all I was looking for is that when I bring this forward on the utility bills, that's when you would kind of vote on it. I just didn't, you know, for me, it's, I just, if everyone was around the table saying, yeah, we don't like what you're doing here, that's the part of it that I need to know. So that's if there doesn't seem to be, there's a cover level, because the other part too is that you may take this away, you may get some conversations on the street, and that may change your mind on things, but it looks like right now, this seems like a pretty simple one. And again, interesting that garbage collection has been in the city of Trail for a long time, and to now hand that over is one of the things that's a bit different this year from other years.
Okay. We'll just leave it at that then and move on to the water and sewer discussion. Okay.
Stop sharing, and I know that what we will believe we'll do here is if I can ask get a bit of a capital presentation that Ben and Craig and I will go through, and so he's going to have that up on his screen here. I think it's either, I don't think we printed off that presentation. Right? Share the screen for that one.
Yeah, and I don't think I can do both. I thought I was going to be up here, but we'll do it.
Oh, okay.
We'll do it on here. What are you seeing there? No, I don't want that. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ben Grizzly Jones. I'm the Transportation Services Working Foreman, ENGTech, and we're just going to do a little run through of what the numbers look like from our perspective for 2024, as well as a bit of a review of the 2023 projects, just highlighting some of the work that was done.
We'll note too that you'll see some beautiful photos here. These are courtesy of Mr. Jones.
Courtesy of the drone that we have for some of the work that we've had performed. It's been used for many purposes so far. So this slide is taking a look at the Cambridge Creek File and Lake ecosystem. So this was a project that we undertook a few years ago to remove the two dams. It was started in 2021, and this year is the last planned segment of this project. There might be one additional 5-year monitoring aspect of it, but that won't fall under grants, but we're working on trying to have that signed off in 2023 so that that doesn't have to occur. So I'll give you just sort of the one look. So this is looking back up the lake from the dam, Cambridge, and these next photos are what the restoration looks like now in place with the dam removed.
And it was quite interesting. I had the benefit a year ago to go up a year ago, and you'll see some of these logs sticking in there. And it was quite fascinating that the environmental engineers that deal with this, in doing that, that's the sort of thing that allows for birds to perch on, and then they actually deposit, they actually transfer seeds and those sorts of things for us. And again, it's quite educational for an accountant up there to see all that they were doing. And the other part that was really fascinating was that whole marsh and the holding of water and how they built it so that you don't end with fast water that starts to erode and then it just sort of moves itself back. And again, it was super educational being able to experience that.
Yeah, so as you can see, and these photos were taken in 2022, so this is only 1 year after the restoration occurred. So that's why I say the 5-year plan, we might be well beyond that, because I think they were quite pleased with the speed at which it was taking. There's one more photo here looking back down the other way, looking down the lake. So you can just kind of see the scope of the natural valley and what it would have looked like before the Cambridge Dam was put in place. And then this is just a bit of a breakdown of the project, estimated at 2.4 million. All of the funding came from the grants that you see there, the Real Estate Foundation grant and the Investing in Canada. The Investing in Canada grant ends December 31st of this year. And like I say, it covers off 100% of the costs up to this point. I can provide this presentation afterwards as well if you'd like. So the next project we're going to highlight is the Groutage Ave Missing Link project. This one is still underway, as many of you have probably seen. This project was budgeted at 2.3 million. Construction began in the fall with Marwest as the prime. Some of the funding for that project was just under $500,000 from our water and sewer funds, about $260,000 from our storm fund, and then $950,000, including a grant of $500,000 from CVT for the transportation services. We were expecting the project to be completed 2023, but it's looking more like it's going to carry into next year with paving. And you'll see some of those numbers in the budgets for 2024 as carry forwards. The utility project for the trenchless sewer project, that was the cured in place lining that we did. This project was budgeted at $759,000 and awarded to In Situ Form Technologies.
And just so council is aware, it's quite a fascinating art of what they do, in the sense that it's almost like a balloon. So if they can go from one handhole to another and they heat it up. So it's a resin and they run it through the size, so they can camera it all, first of all, make sure there's no roots and those sorts of things, make sure they go to the areas where they can cut out the ability for people to deposit into from their properties. But when it cures in place, it actually puts about a 1/2 inch fiberglass inside the current pipe. And again, sometimes the pipe's not there anymore because it's wooden or it's clay. And so you can imagine it will cost us again to tear all of that and put in a new pipe. So be able to take what's already there as far as the size or the diameter of what would have been a pipe and right in place. Once they kind of drag it through the pipe from manhole to manhole, they then pressurize it and it's like a balloon and it kind of just fills itself out. And then it cures in place, and that will last a very, very long time. It also really helps with, because before we go and do that, we got to fix any repairs. They also make sure that you cut out all the roots, because that's obviously a nutrient-filled water system, and that really also helps with us on blockages. Once we clean that out and then we put in that new pipe that doesn't have the ability for for the tree roots to get down into it. So we see real benefits of that. Sometimes the benefit is that flow happens, but further down, we got an issue where it just wasn't flowing as well before, and now it's flowing better, and now we run into a new problem, but that's not uncommon. But it is a brilliant technology, saving millions of dollars for municipalities across the country.
Yeah, so what you're seeing in the first photo is the insertion point, like Colin said, the fiberglass goes in there, and the furthest photo on the right is where they extract, where they pulled it out, and then heat treated it to cure in place. And so just some highlights from that project. And we have been doing trenchless for a number of years now, starting in about 2011. This year they lined about 1.5 kilometers of pipe, ranging in size from 6 to 12 inches in size. We inspected another 6 kilometers of pipe for future lining work to see what condition they're in. Reinstated 89 service connections. So those are the ones Colin was talking, where they go along with the robot afterwards. But in that same vein, we eliminated 17 abandoned services. So these were points where other old sewers, old services for houses where roots could infiltrate the system. And then on this map, you can see.
And on your spreadsheet here, so if you're looking on the wastewater utility on the A1, you'll notice the map in larger size, just because.
Yeah, so it did. Yeah, there should be 3. This just shows. No, it's not sharing stuff.
Maybe I may want to check to see if Paul was on.
Yes, Paul is on.
It stopped me from. So let's redo the share then. Yeah, so on this map highlighted, the purple just to show what was done this year, primarily in Shavers Bench, which the way the program has worked, as there's been an inspection year, and then we've worked backwards from that. So the next year we go and do some lining in that area. We inspected in Glenmary this year. If there were bad areas there, we would look to do that as our next round of lining. And there's a number of point repairs also that were done through West Trail and other areas in the earlier years of the program. But it wasn't until about 2012 and 2017 that we started doing entire lengths of pipe. So on to the 2024 sewer budget, unless there's any questions on that, or if you want to save them till the end, either works. Okay. Craig, do you want to speak to the 2024 sewer budget a little bit?
Yeah, we can start with Groutage Ave missing link. That's the carryover from this project. That's all the surface work, the asphalt things that we won't be able to get finished this time of year.
Just because the asphalt plant.
Yeah, they're tentatively closing down by I think the end of the week, or yeah.
So it's done except for the paving.
They're still putting in underground services. They'll have that all finished by. Yeah. Daniel Street retaining wall synergy. So, as you know, a while back we had a failure of the retaining wall up on Daniel Street. So this is part of that project. This is just the retaining wall portion, or the sewer portion. As you'll see throughout the presentation, there's the water portion of this project and so forth. So yeah, 740,000 for sewer. That's for 2024.
And I think it's important at this stage is that we got some new numbers for this project.
Yeah.
So when we brought it a year ago, we were at 2.4, and now that was under Class D estimates.
The Class D estimate, yeah.
So we've now got Class A estimate, and that amount has increased to 3.6. So
3.8.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. 3.8. Yes.
Can you explain the difference between the Class B and Class A?
Yeah. Class D is pretty broad spectrum for the job.
Okay.
When they get into a Class A estimate, they're breaking it down by
Okay.
component. It'll include all the engineering fees, any holdback or contingency amount as well.
Current costs change even within a year. Yeah, so, yeah. But okay. Next we have sewer main immediate repairs. So that's a portion for spot repairs. Just as we have spots that relining won't necessarily, we won't be able to reline. So this will just be replacement of those, the traditional way, which is a full excavation. Yeah. sanitary manhole repairs, we have several thousand manholes, and some of them are old brick, they're deteriorating, and we aren't able to repair them under operation funds. So this will help us out with those repairs. Flow meters, so we have more than 3 lift stations, sewage lift stations, but these are the 3 big lift stations we have. We need to measure the flow so we can monitor if there's a break, how much flow we have to report it to the environment, and we can track if there's outflow. So that means water, other substances going into the sewer. We can kind of monitor that and keep track of it and report it as necessary. So those are 3 flow meters. They're approximately 20,000 each, and that will cover that plus the installation.
And Craig, is it also RDKV because they operate the plant? Did we have to, is that for them as well as the province? Or?
They may require some information. It's more for us in our section because they take over once it goes to the sewer interceptor along the river, then it's all our regional district there. Pipe storage rack. This is to save us real estate at Public Works, plus get our pipe off the ground in the wintertime so we can actually find it. We have a lot of snow here sometimes, so we just want to get everything off the ground and into one nice area instead of spreading it over. So that's what that is for 63,000. We did one a few years back. It helped us out a lot, so we're trying to add to that system and tidies everything up. Yeah.
The next slide here, I was doing one for the trenchless, and Colin made the good suggestion of why don't we see where we're at with both the water and sewer for the entire system. Unfortunately, some of our mapping information was not in the system, so we've been working at updating it and getting everything current. So a lot of the yellow that you see there that says installation date unknown, it's not that we don't know when this pipe went in, it's that we don't know the exact date. We might not know some of the material types. We can speculate what a lot of it is, but we don't really want to put that information in. So a lot of that we've left out, but like you'll see downtown, East Trail, West Trail, that's 20s and 30s. Glen Mary, 1953 and 63, 2 phases. Some of that work up in Mural Heights would be into the 2011s, and then Sunningdale would be about the 1950s. So we do know when this stuff went in, we just don't know exact dates, and that's kind of what we want to put in our system.
So the hope here, council, as we move forward, is that we will be able to show you sort of the age of the pipe that kind of was installed, and then obviously, whenever we've done repairs or that are in the last 20 years, that we can kind of get a sense if we've got 80 kilometers of pipe. If we've either relined or replaced 20 kilometers, you know that you've got 60 kilometers that we would need to work on, and again, it's a continually ongoing process. But I think it just really does highlight the work that's been done, and as Ben said, that some of these areas that are yellow, we know, for example, in Sunningdale, it's just ongoing work that we're doing with our GIS and our system, and like the hope would be next year is that we would have that labeled with a year, so there would be less and less unknown, would be the goal. In fact, the goal would be that we don't have any unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even since this map was produced, we've done a lot of work to, like say, eliminate a lot of that yellow. So the map you see next will definitely not have nearly as much. Were there any questions on that map?
Is there anything installed before 1950 on this map here?
Yes. So like I say, the downtown area and East Trail and West Trail, a lot of that pipe primarily was around 1920, 1930.
Okay.
Yeah. And so part of not putting that information in too is that we know when that pipe was originally installed, but we also have work that's been done since then. And so not only is that initial information not in there, but the work that's been done since in some places. So we want to make sure that we're not, that we're putting the most current information in there.
Yeah, so this is a work in progress, and like you said, a year from now, we'll have that data.
So on to the 2024 water budget portion. If you want to speak to some of those again as well, Craig, that pertain to.
Okay, on the list is the Sunningdale Intake Erosion Control Program. So On the Sunnydale intake along the river, it's eroding the bank away. We have to go back and restore it periodically. It's to the point where the fence line's even laying over, so it's crept up quite a bit. So this will be some engineering and planning to have that restored.
And I wanted to give a shout out because Ben was looking at it. He was noticing that we have a lot of rocks coming on this Daniel Street project. So he's like, hey, wait a second, we need some riprap, we need some rock here. It's a good idea if we could use that. Now, that all makes sense to us, except that if you can imagine, rock has certain, okay, Councilor Benson, I thought I'd have something. That there's issues with certain rock it being close to the water. And so we're gonna have that, the testing of the rock to see whether or not we can take it from where it is and use it to reinforce the area.
Yeah.
So we're looking to get ahead of that by having it tested in place on Daniel Street so that if we get that contract to go through, we can move it in one movement rather than transferring it somewhere else. And
Hopefully repurpose it.
Yes.
Yeah. Water treatment plant turbidity meters. So we have 4, 1 for each filter bed. They have failed. We are measuring it by hand. It's not ideal. We'd like to get speed again and replace them. So it's just equipment replacement. It's getting old and yeah, they're spent, they're done. Water treatment plant, raw water and distribution flow meters. There's again in the water treatment plant, there's 2 flow meters. They measure the raw water coming from the intake and also the clean water, the potable water that comes out of it. They're no longer, usually calibrate them yearly. We can no longer calibrate them. They're just too old. And we need the accuracy to measure flows and etc. So the idea is to replace them and start from scratch again and we'll have good measuring equipment.
What is the lifespan on those water and distribution meters?
Well, the plant is 1994, so 29 years. I would say they're not measuring accurately anymore, probably about 2 years. And we discovered that working through our water conservation plan. So for part of that plan, we need these instruments to measure, they got to be very precise. And that'll help us out for future planning of the water conservation.
I'm just thinking asset
Yeah.
management stuff. What you're making those investments, how long should we expect to have those assets for before they need to be replaced and budgeting?
Yeah, certain instruments you can, like I said, calibrate and rebuild them, but they're just too old now. They're not making parts.
Thank you.
Okay, Lower Lookout Reservoir. So we had a roof failure last year on the Lower Lookout Reservoir. It's in the just above City Hall here. We're planning to put a Concast roof on as opposed to the old wood truss. Interior Health would not even let you build a new a wooden truss roof. It would be a health risk. So it's in the hands of a structural engineer. They're doing the assessment of if it can handle the extra weight of the concrete roof. So they're still working on that. So that amount right there is just for engineering planning, the structural review, the report. Next year, we plan on actually completing the project as long as it's okay, and we'll handle the leak.
And Craig, again, would that be something that would be almost like a lid that they would sort of?
Yeah, so Concast, they're high tensile strength Concast panels. So they'll be roughly 4 to 5 feet wide, full length. You'll lift them on, drop them on with a crane. Yeah, and that's kind of a quicker way of doing it, and you won't have to shovel it. It'll be semi-flat. Yeah, it'll be a good fix and improvement. So, okay, again, Groutage Ave Missing Link project. This is the carryover portion again, coming out of the water budget, just for the service work.
Yeah.
And sorry, I just want to clarify, sorry, first I'm interrupting. Daniel Street retaining wall, was that not something that was budgeted to happen this year? Or start?
Yes.
And did we?
We talked about that a couple of times, just saying that the project engineering.
Everything's
delays,
just taking
that sort of
longer,
thing.
so.
Yes, it's not something you want to start. And winter. We did get recertification of the engineering of the fix that we've got going on there. So it allows us to go through the winter knowing that we've got that engineering certified.
And the allocated funds from this year will transfer. over.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's back to your question. Daniel Street retaining wall is in the water 1.1 million. It's up substantially from last year with the Class A estimate, but in order, it makes sense to do all the infrastructure as well as the wall at once because of the disruptions. Yeah. And we are replacing water main and sewer that are problematic. It's not like we plan on doing them anyways.
It might, yeah, it probably wouldn't even be possible with the wall replacement to not get that infrastructure out of the way. These walls, how deep and thick they are at the bottom, we have no idea how intertwined everything is.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions on that? Water treatment plant intake pump 1, 2, and 3. This is a phase project. We've already rebuilt pump 3. It will be installed at the end of this month. We should have funds left over from last year or this year actually to begin rebuilding pump number 2. So we should see some savings. Just we have the manpower there, the crews on site. We will begin to pull that and hopefully have it ready for the spring. So might be ahead of the game if all goes well. And again, it's about every 10 years this happens. Pump number 3, I don't believe was ever done, but it used to stay, it was just a redundancy that stayed at idle for pump number 1 and 2. We continually run alternate. So, okay, update to water system master plan. So this plan really is part of an asset management plan, basically to help us narrow down where the next water lines should be replaced, or just give us a better idea of the next spots to budget for. Cedar Ave to Talking Street infrastructure upgrade. Cedar Ave to Talking Street, it's just over here. It's a water main that's going over a steep bank. It's kind of like Milligan Ave, what we just did last year. It's very problematic and hard to deal with, especially if it breaks in the wintertime. It's quite a steep slope, so we want to get that repaired. This is just the planning portion of it. There's a few water services coming off it, but it's quite an old water line and it is problematic. It's leaking nonstop. We patch it and it just starts up somewhere else. So. Got Bear Creek Pump Station improvements. Plan on we tried doing it this last year. We want to carry it over to next year. It's just removing. We got a big air pressure tank, a bunch of other pipe work that we want to repair, and that's what that's all about. Water treatment plant, effluent, dechlorination, and backwash. We have the engineering working on it this year, but we would like to get the project actually started. So on our backwash cycle, we have a certain amount of residual chlorine left over. We're not allowed to dump it into the river, or we won't be, because all that backwash water, that's where it goes back to the river, and we are required to take that out. So it's not just chlorine. There's actually other minerals that come out of the river that we have to take out as well. And that means there'll be a settling chamber, potentially a settling chamber built where it'll have to, the backwash water will go into that, settle out for a certain amount of time, and then it can be dumped back to the river. So, and this is something we have no control over. It's with the Fish and Wildlife Act and so forth, it has to get done. So. Water treatment plant transfer pump rebuilds. So we have 2 large pumps in the water treatment plant. They have never been rebuilt. Again, they're at the threshold where we'd like to repair them before they fail. A little preventive maintenance. And that will be $100,000 this year, and a phase project next year will be 2025, another 100.
So Craig, is that again another place you've got redundancy? Is that what?
Yeah, so we can run the plant off of one pump when we repair the other, and then we'll pick, that's why it's over 2 years.
Sorry, so the transfer pump is different from the intake?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and again, 1994 is actually quite a relatively new
Yeah.
plant, but again, it keeps up on new when it's.
They run continuously, so that's it's a high wear item.
A lot of sediment coming out of the river too,
Yeah.
that sandblasts basically.
Yeah, it's raw water, so it does catch it. Yeah. Any other questions on some of that stuff?
And same thing there, if you looked at your B water sheet that you've got there, attached to it should be this map, just in that.
Yeah, and that's just another map showing where the state of our current water lines are. A lot more has been done on the water system since then. You can see there's a lot less yellow, so we're aware a lot more of the dates.
And again, another, in progress. But again, when you look at it, it's sort of not hard to look at the installed 1950 to 2000, the unknown installation, as compared to the installed after 2000. And so it's one of those, and I don't know what C900 Blue Brute means, but
So
what year that
that's your newest.
That's
So the light pipe that one person can put in, that's what we
Type of
install
material.
nowadays.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
It's the latest, greatest.
Blue Brute,
Yeah.
okay. So we don't have a lot of Blue Brute. And again, obviously anything that you can have in that green and Blue Brute is going to be what we are moving towards. And certainly this is one that kind of keeps me awake a bit, is kind of what's happening with water and where we are on asset management. And
Some quick numbers that go along with that is we do have about 5 kilometers of Blue Brute, the C900 installed in the city, and about 12 kilometers of HDP, PVC, and C900. So those would be all your newer materials over that period of time. And that 1950s to 2000, that's about 58 kilometers. So that's our big question mark. There's only a little bit before 1950s. We have about 2 kilometers, we're saying, and then about 15 is the unknown. So some of that will fall in that before 1950 as well.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, excellent.
Sorry, Ben, how much for the HDP?
That as well as the PVC and C900. So that's kind of lumping everything from 2000 on is about 12 kilometers of new installations.
As we go through records and pull more data, this may
Right.
change and evolve a little bit for sure.
But yeah, and just for the reference on both those systems, it's about 87 kilometers of sewer and 87 kilometers of water throughout the city.
Hard to believe.
So that's the last slide we had from that presentation. If there was any questions that didn't get answered.
Although I hadn't been checking if Councilor Butler had any questions, I didn't see his hand pop. But,
So I have a question. I don't know if it relates to the water system, to our water system, but does it affect our water system when the levels of the river go so far down, so quickly, almost, well, because I live on the river, I notice that it drops really quickly. I don't know what that would do to our water supply. I'm sure it's,
What comes out of the plant will be consistent because that's why we're treating it. It is harder on the plant. We have more, like in the spring, we have more silt. So the plant works much harder to process that water. It's just more cost, more wear on the equipment.
yeah.
But the end product should be very similar to what you normally get throughout the year.
Oh,
There is hardness levels that do change, and even if you have a well, it will change from year to year, or from seasonal.
I was just wondering if it was harder on our equipment when that happens. I'm sure you guys are made aware that the water level is going to be dropping. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
but maybe it's when you both were talking about when it's scouring, because maybe it's more of a concern when we've got spring runoff and we've got more
Yeah,
turbidity, I guess, maybe.
it is. There's much higher turbidity. We do more filter bed backwash cycles.
Mhm.
So there's a cost to that. I mean, it's more pumping and, yeah, we use the treated water to do the backwash cycle. And yeah, there's bigger cost, more there. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess the other question would be, is there any other grant opportunities for more money or even with the first rising costs? And we got, I think some money was grant money. But
Yeah.
Is there any other opportunities for grant funding that we can apply for?
We kind of monitor that continuously all the time, and we don't know when they're going to happen, but we do monitor for it.
There seems to be a benefit in having the engineering done and having the project shelf ready so that when the grant funding comes along, we're able to jump on it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if we don't have them, then we miss those opportunities. So
I'm leveraging the funding if we've already done the engineering, if it's shelf ready. When you go
Exactly.
to them, you ask for the money because we already got the opportunity sitting there.
Great question, but we are noticing, council, that they're less inclined just to provide any grant money to replace a pipe that you have had in your. If you're doing something new with it, maybe you wanted to see if you could run a river or power off of it. So you had a water pipe coming down, that sort of thing. Or if you were to combine with someone else to eliminate, if you were to combine with another municipality, maybe and work that's where the kind of the grant money starts to show up when you start seeing those sorts of things, efficiencies. But if you just got, here's my regular, we've got to fix this pipe and it's 1950s on or whatever it is, they tend not to be putting a lot of money towards those sorts of things.
For the declarination and backwash project?
Yeah.
What are we doing currently?
Currently, working with Scott Wallace with True Engineering. We're just got an email today. He's looking at locations for the settling chamber.
Okay.
We did a walk around it has to be close to the plant. We did a walk around and we're trying to find the best location for the most cost-effective way of doing this. These regulations, as we've been doing this project, they've been changing, and we got to come up with a new solution. There's more engineering. It seems to be a vicious circle, right? So yeah, they're changing the regulations faster than we can even make the plan.
But currently, we probably are releasing that water.
Yeah.
We
are. Yeah.
And but the plan is that again, Fisheries is saying, you know, we've got some runway here, but we need to get on this to be compliant.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do we monitor what's going on?
We did a whole bunch of testing on what is actually going in, and we recorded it, and that's where we're planned. That's kind of in terms of the size of the settling chamber. Yeah.
Other questions?
Well, there's lots of time for more questions because I'm just going to go through now a couple of my bigger spreadsheet, and again, Paul can't see it unfortunately. It's almost running over to him if I don't. But basically, what this spreadsheet, you saw it last year. Part of it is it's trying to map out what's happening, and the bigger component is, do we have enough money to be able to fund what the capital asks are? So if I start with the spreadsheet that's got A on top of it, that'll be your wastewater. And the other important factor here is to speak to kind of what we see is happening in 2023. We are still in November, but we sort of project out on what we're expecting to see revenue and expense wise. And so in looking at this spreadsheet, its starting point is under row 42. And for the 2023, it's column L and M. So you kind of start with your revenues, and you can see we had a 8.5% increase a 5% increase in the sewer fees in 2023. And you can see that we're a little bit higher than what we had budgeted. And under the metered revenue, again, pretty close. And the tax contribution to sewer. And I've got a few notes on this because it's one of those areas that I'm still new and I'm still learning, but wanted to bring it kind of to council's attention. And we'll talk about that in my presentation part. But as you can see that in the current year, when you look at B operating expenses, it looks like we may be slightly under what we had budgeted for in 2023. Now, again, that's all with the expectation that we don't have any major blowouts that are happening in the next 6 weeks, which can happen. But the way that the budget's shaping up this year, we're a little bit ahead, which is a good news story. So also debt servicing annual, you'll notice that's coming off in a couple of years. So that's a good news story. When you look under row 50, you can see that the A, which is in your operational revenues minus your operating expenses, this is the annual contribution that goes into capital. So you can see that we're projecting right now, but under column M, you can see that was budgeted at 363. We're probably going to be hopefully $70,000 higher of that going into the reserve, which goes kind of shows you where your opening balance is under, again, column L. You jump up to row 15. You can see this is what our opening reserve balance is. We get 3.7 million contribution from revenue, hoping for 438,000. And then what is our expectation for capital this year? And you can see that's just over, not quite $1.1 million. One of the positives that we are seeing that on one side, I mean, got inflation crushing us on one, but on our interest income, when you've got this much money sitting in the reserve, earning a higher interest rate is helping us. We're almost looking at almost $40,000 more in interest income than what we have budgeted. So again, every little bit helps. So that in itself flows. So if you look at column L, row 24, you're seeing that our reserve balance is dropping from about 3.7 at the beginning of the year to about 3.2. That carry forward to, again, the opening reserve balance, which again is row 17, column N under the green. So green is 2024. So you can see we're starting with about 3.2 million. Again, jumping down into row 42, but now under column N, I'm proposing a 4% increase in sewer rates. I had fives in here before, but the sewer seems to be in a pretty healthy spot. And as we've got sort of a bigger pressure or bigger ask because of Daniel Street, but again, if we didn't, we'd be in a healthier spot. But we can see that some of the list of 2024 capital that was in the presentation, where we've got some point repairs, we've got this Daniel Street project, which is significant, and then the miscellaneous equipment that Craig spoke to. We're looking at about 1.334 million in capital. But going back down again too, so if you look at row 42, you can see where our revenues end up, and then our operating expenses, and then our debt that we're again in about putting about $384,000 into the reserve. But when you're spending capital at 1.334 million and you're only putting 384 in, you can see that our drop in our closing of our reserve balance, which is row 24, column N, is at 2.3 expectation. Everything was to go towards budget, which we know that it never will, but just giving you a sense that it's with the last couple of years with some of these higher expenses, it has kind of chipped away at the reserve. Now going out, we are looking at doing some point repairs and then bringing some in situ form. We've got the 5-year plan there, and then after that, so after 2028, you start kind of putting some placeholders in. We do try under line 36 to make sure that we are accounting for inflation, so that even though we've got maybe a stagnant amount of here's 500,000, that 500,000 we expect to be $180,000 higher in 2020, 2032 kind of thing. Overall, there's a comfort level for me, and with what's happening on sewer, to be able to say, like, look, we can pull off a bit on the 4%, and I'll move now to my other presentation here on water and sewer. Oh, well, maybe I should have done water first, but maybe just don't look at water right now. But if you look at the sewer rates after discount, 2023 was $265. 2024 with the proposed 4% change goes up by $10, so less than $1 a month. And so this is what I wanted to get to my notes, is that as you look through this spreadsheet, you can see that the proposed, which is the, well, I mean, boy, not doing well, yeah. I got the titles back, that's not good. Okay, so we'll fix that later. This should say 2024 sewer utility budget notes. The proposed sewer rates right now are not providing enough net operation revenue to fund capital in the future. And as you can see, the reserve is being depleted over time. However, it is gradual, which, you know, gives us time. And you kind of notice that if you're looking at the A spreadsheet, if you kind of look at column 24 as it bounces along, you can see that it's still pretty good, but each year we're sort of chipping away at, you know, kind of what's happening and what we're putting in. I do note that the end of the sewer debt in 2025 will be very helpful. So that automatically is going to flow into our, you know, or increasing what we're putting into our contributions into the capital. The one thing that I noticed is that there was a $160,000 tax contribution, but it's been unchanged since 2007. And it makes up 13% of the sewer revenues. So even as we are looking at the sewer rates and we increase them by 4%, you're kind of asking 87% of the fees to kind of pick up that. So because we haven't had any changes, been static on this tax contribution. And I did note that if the tax contribution to sewer had increased by an average rate of inflation of 2%, it would now be sitting at about $250,000 today, which is about $74,000 more, which I believe that if that was something that council wanted to do as a one-time, now again, that kind of moves off of fees in the utility and puts it on taxes. So it's not like we're getting away from it, but just noting that because we have been stagnant since 2007, that there's sort of that heavier lifting has been done on the utility rate itself, which again isn't uncommon. It's very unique that you actually have a tax contribution going to utilities. One of the things here is that we, like I said, I think it's gradual. We're working on it. It seems to be, you know, pretty good, pretty healthy. We've got some tweaks. Not a real concern, but something we need to monitor. And one of the suggestions that I have is that, for example, if the city general operating fund created an unexpected surplus, council could consider allocating a portion of that into the sewer capital reserve. So that's something just to consider rather than adjusting now. Again, overall, when I look at sewer, we're in a pretty healthy spot. Certainly helps that, you know, through our partner, the RTKB, they're in charge of the sewage treatment plant. So that's one of the things that we're just sort of in that transmission line of work here. But so those are, again, you've got a handout with this document, and part of it again today is I know there's a lot of information here, but and again, if I can ask you to cross out where you notice that I've got water utility in the wrong title, you can change that for me. Embarrassing as that is, but that's what we do. Now I don't know if anyone has any kind of questions on Schedule A or just on my utility notes at all.
Well,
Nope.
I'm gonna ask the scary question that not anybody's gonna probably like it as stable, but if we had another failure of a retaining wall, because we're not doing a whole lot of a retaining wall, there's how many feet between them?
It's pretty long, actually. It's about 130 meters.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's
that's
pretty substantial.
does that do the most of the road?
Well, it's a split level road at
Okay.
Daniel. So that's paving both roads, doing 2 water lines, doing a storm system, and servicing about 59 or 65 houses.
Okay, and then what about Topping Street?
Topping Street has been done most of Topping Street was done in phases back in 2011 and 14, I want to say.
That's right. Yeah.
There's one phase left that would be the last section where there's no houses essentially. But there's no plans to do that at this point.
I'm just asking a scary question.
Right.
If we had another retaining wall failure, and we have lots of them in our communities, where does this, I mean, we're basically not budgeted for another retaining wall failure at this point.
We typically do monitor the retaining walls. They take, points of measurement to see if there's any movement. So we can monitor the typical ones on Munter Street, the really big retaining walls, we can see if there's any movement ahead of time.
Okay.
And
So
hopefully
at this point, there's nothing that's on the radar.
nothing's sticking out at this point, so, yeah.
I'm just
Oh, no.
Yeah.
thought it's funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
They're kind of survey marks and they can look for really minimal measurements and
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move now to Schedule B. And Schedule B is our water. And it's definitely one that, again, is concerning.
It's a good way to start.
I'm not nervous.
Well, and again, I preface this on nothing, it's nothing that can't be fixed. It's sometimes it's a pay now, pay later. When you're dealing with these assets and the engineering tech to use a certain terminology, whether or not it's the Big Blue or the different products that are coming out, these products tend to last way longer than the products that we had been using in the past. So sometimes when you do these replacements, they end up having a much longer useful life than we have. But when you have a community like we have in the Kootenays here that are pretty old, and you've got, becoming a city in the turn of the century, we still have wood stave sewer pipes. We've got different, been talked to, we've still got a couple kilometers left of stuff that was built in 1950. And sometimes it's fascinating. Some of the steel in that, those products is way better quality than the steel that you got before or mid and after the war. It's quite fascinating. And again, I know over in Nelson, we had a lot of galvanized. And when you've got a gravity fed system, as soon as it gets a little scouring, gets rubbing on the sand, you can put a clamp on that, it'll just move to the next place down. And we took out a plug that had 5 feet, it had 5 clamps on it, trying to hold the water back. But when you've got that much pressure, that's one of the challenges. And we have a bit of that here because we've got the reservoirs are up high. The reason they're up high is because they provide the head to get the pressure to your home. So that we do have a bit of that gravity feed is a big part of ours, even though we are pumping up out of the river to get the water there. And that's why, again, we've talked about before, when you think about that water plant, when you drive into Trail and you can see it way across the way, that actually has enough head power to it to bring the water up to the other side of Tabnac. It's really quite fascinating, the hydraulics of water. Anyway, so again, same sort of concept here on the spreadsheet. Looking at 2023, if you go down to row 54, you can see we're pretty much bang on. We had an 8.5% increase in water rates last year. We can see that the meter revenue is pretty close. Here's another one here where we've had this parcel tax, and I'll talk a bit about that further. And we also have this tax contribution to water. Now, great things, but some of these have not changed. Well, at least 2007, some of them, depending on where they fit, haven't changed for quite a while. You can see that right off the bat, again, our operational expenditures, and because you've got a plant that is drawing from the river, going up, even though it's a relatively new water plant, 1994, you see that we're having some repairs that are needing to be dealt with. But as soon as you pull the water out and have to treat it and then deliver it out to your residents, we've got long distances, we've got treatment. So anything we can do to try to improve that is going to be beneficial, but it is costly. And certainly the regulations on water, in particular, way back when, if I say Walkerton, that really changed the game for people. And it is just ongoing increasing. You can hear it. It makes sense. We don't want to be putting what would seem to be raw water into the river where it's not at a quality that is approved by the ministry. But again, I kind of find it fascinating that we get minerals from the water that we take out, and then we've got to deal with it before we put the water back in to the river, which gave us the minerals in the first place. But they make the rules, certain things. So again, revenues over that. Another positive, although it's a number of years out here, next 5 years, you do have a water debt being, ending. So that's something that is a positive, and we start to see some of the bump ups. And that would be for me, kind of that row here is, again, row 63, as you just follow it along with some of these increases, what we're trying to do here is get that contribution up into the, to be able to be matching water collected, so net operating revenue going in to be able to feed capital. That is where you want to be. And again, as you can see in this one, after a couple of years here, we've got not a lot going on, but we know that there are things. Even last year, we had sort of Bear Creek well, we had some other projects, but until we get that water master plan, and as you talked about, Craig, that the benefit of having the water master plan will point out what our real concerns are, and then we can tackle it. But my sense is that it's not going to be less; it's going to be more. But this is a place where if you're going to update, a project, whether it's one of the creeks, whether it's the water plant, these are items that are going to last 30, 50 years. So that's a good place to borrow money. And then by the time we need to do that, I'm, not saying for sure, but it could be that we kind of are down on a downward swing on interest rates too, if it's in the next couple of years. So that's something that if we were planning for, that it might be wise for us to borrow 10, 20, 30 years to be able to do some major work on some of this funding that we would be able to use to get the money in the reserve, allow us to be able to take this capital and then have it paid for over time and by the user, instead of trying to increase on the current users who have benefited because some of the capital infrastructure probably hasn't been picked up just because of the cost of doing it. And I understand the concern, and it will be the same concern that's at this table that has been at this table. It's what's happening to our residents, what's happening to the affordability. I mean, when you start saying, "Hey, we're increasing water again by this amount, we're increasing water again by that amount." Again, one of the not unique in some of these areas is that with your water, you pay a flat fee. You can use as much water as you want. A lot of these other places, talk to Vernon and other components where you've got to pay water. The water bill is significant, and water value sometimes kind of gets pointed out because of the cost of it. That being said, you can see that after operations, we're budgeting around $400,000 going to the capital reserve. We know even in the current year, last year was 1.4 million. This year, big bump, especially with Daniel Street, we're looking at $2.2 million. So if you're putting in $400,000 in the reserve each year and you're spending 2.2, mathematically, you can see very quickly that we've got a challenge. Again, it's not insurmountable. Even last year when we did this graph, I know that it was late in the day, and we'll have more discussions about this. What can we do? And that's where that orange tab is under 2026. But I had plunked in that we need to borrow some money to be able to tackle some of these projects, and that got us through the 5-year kind of plan. But I expect that we're going to have the same conversations. But again, we also maybe will say, well, maybe we can't do $2 million worth of water. We can only do $1 million. But as we saw from the map, we've got a lot of the product is something that it's just kind of a bit of a ticking, not a ticking time bomb, because the stuff will work, but it is getting to end of life. And I think when Craig says to me a lot of times when he goes to do some repairs, same problem. It's like, oh, we fix this, we put a clamp on it, we come back a year later, that one's there, but now you got to put a clamp down here. So, putting our head in the sand is not going to work. I'm not suggesting that's what people do, but it's my job to be able to bring this forward. It is the provincial's job. They're definitely looking at what type of funding that they are going to provide and tying in, especially the community works fund for, you're giving you money for doing capital projects. What are you doing? Where's your asset management plan? Are you making any headway on this? And again, we're not the only place that's not, A1. In fact, when we go to these seminars, we're with everybody else. Now we need to get above that, and it's going to take some time. It's not all on council's shoulders here today, but definitely I would say that the province is turning up the heat, and I think that they're also getting some pressure from the feds, because the feds are saying, look, we're giving you all this capital money from gas tax. Like, where's the results-oriented component to it? And they've upped their reporting for finances from the province as well to be able to speak to that. They're in the process of negotiating the next gas tax arrangement, which we come that's a while. And part of that is going to be, as you talked to Councillor Henson, is what's your plan for your asset management, and show me results, not just that you've got a plan. So anyway, you can see very quickly that after 2025 here, that we start kind of got a bit of a problem here. And again, that can easily be adjusted by just saying, oh, we'll take $1 million of this or $500,000 out. And that's probably what we'll do to kind of get this year balanced. But I just need to bring it to your attention that if we need to keep up with the infrastructure deficit that's coming, here's some of the numbers that we're seeing. And we'll have a plan. We're gonna be able to work through it. That being said, that will come from the water master plan, which again is going to help us with our asset management plan as well for water. I don't know, on those questions, I think you guys understand how to read this. I don't know if there's any questions. One, you'll notice I've got, under the Glen Mary Reservoir, I've got $40,000 there. The engineering tech was not sure if that finishes it or whether or not we need to add another, yes, we'll be 20 under this year, or will it be 30? And do we need to carry forward anything into 2024? I just don't want to make the mistake that I did in the past, where I take out your budget and you're like, hey, wait a second, I needed some money for carry forward here. So I've highlighted that for myself to make sure that that question gets answered. And again, you can see that we're under budget this year. One of the main components of that obviously was Daniel Street, and then you can see that Daniel Street is also basically jumped up a good $600,000 in 2024. But as President Jones said, that's putting in 2 water lines that are going through there as well. So it's part of the arrangement. And we've got the wastewater treatment plant equipment, and those are things that the province is saying, no, you just can't put that off for another 4 or 5 years. You need to meet the regulations to be in compliance, because therefore we don't need to be putting any fines for that. Now, if I get you guys to look on your Zoom, I've got this back up. So in looking at the water rates after discount, so in 2023, after that 8.5% increase, it had moved up to $403. In 2024, that's increased to $443 at 10%. Again, these are all proposed. This is just me talking to council. Council can say, we don't like that, we want to do something different. It's absolutely within your rights. And again, this should say 2024 water utility budget notes. Very quickly, you can see that the proposed water rates that we have are not at a level that will provide enough net operational income to fund capital into the future. As you can see, there's a significant deficit between potential capital projects and the annual net operating income. One component that I noticed was that in 1991, there was a parcel tax created, $150. Now, what was common, not just here in Trip, and it is common even 12 years ago, 14 years ago, when I came to work with the village of Silverton and Slocan, was a lot of people were putting in tax increases, or they used parcel tax for water, because if you called it a tax, then it got the benefit of being on your tax side, and then your homeowner grant could cover it. So there was certainly a lot of properties in all of these small communities and with lower value that the actual tax rate that was being charged was not even enough to use the homeowner grant. So you could actually apply a parcel tax of $150, which I think in 1991 would have been a lot of money. And you actually wouldn't have had any effect on your taxes, because your homeowner grant would then cover that for you. Now, again, if you had a higher price value home, yes, you did have to pay both, but this was a way to be able to get the government to pay for taxes that we needed to collect for the utility. So you would see that a lot of these parcel taxes, saw it in Salmo, saw it in Slocan, in different areas. This was a methodology to be able to bump people's taxes up, to be able to make sure that they weren't giving back the homeowner grant to the province. Most cases now, that's not the case anymore. With the assessed values going up and the cost of taxes, that's not an issue. But I think that's maybe where it came from. You will notice, like I said, it was created in 1991. It's created for the water treatment plant. It was lowered to $100 in 1997 to 2007, and then in 2007, which I do know, this is when we also put in the tax contribution from sewer. So I think something must have been going on back then, and then where it increases back up to 150. So this is per residence that's attached, or per parcel, I should say. So 2007, and it stayed at that rate ever since. And when I look at that $500,000, it makes up almost 20% of the water utility revenues, and yet it has not changed at all. It's great that we have it, but when you've got capital inflation, capital projects, operational inflation this number is becoming less and less factor as far as this is why you've got pressure on the rates. Now again, parcel tax itself, is it still valued? And again, it may be like, well, parcel tax goes down, but your water rate's got to go up. So they may have to have a big jump, but then you wouldn't pay both the investment rates. I did note that if that water parcel tax, its value, if today, if it had increased or if it was increased by the average rate of inflation, would now be $714, which again would be more on the $200 kind of rate for the taxpayer. The other one here, got a couple of things for council to consider. And again, when we talk about tax contribution, I'm not exactly sure why the decision is made, but council could increase the tax contribution, which currently is at $30,000 annually. We get that. Say, it's a bit different, but it has stayed the same. But it is 30,000, so it's not really a big effect on what we need to collect. Council could also consider borrowing funds to create a healthy reserve and be able to do the infrastructure work that we need to do. And then therefore you're paying that off, like I said, over 10, 20, 30 years. But you're also improving your infrastructure that's going to last. And like I said, a lot of these pipings, it's not going to be lasting 25 years, but more like 60 or longer. The last one too, same as what was I mentioned on the water side on the sewer side, is that if the general operating fund created an unexpected surplus, council could consider allocating a portion of the water capital reserve. Like I said, council, I know that that's a lot of information for an hour and a half session here, but the beauty of this is that we've got some time, so we've got time to digest it, come back. Likely we'll probably do a next GOC, probably maybe even do an update, maybe more on the water sewer, just sort of a light update. So we've had a chance to look at some of these. I know a lot of information here today. Hopefully we can have discussions, emails, council saying, hey, look at this, or what else can we do? And that will give me a few weeks to be able to update spreadsheets, come up with some ideas of how we might be able to, in the meantime, like I said, especially in the water system, what's tough is that you don't actually know until we get that water master plan update. So again, having a status quo this year, knowing that we are going to get Daniel Street done, I know that's going to put pressure on reserves, but that's a place where we kind of need to hold pretty solid in what's happening for 2024, but maybe in 2025, maybe we pull back a little bit to kind of get us in a range where the unknown is there, but we can leave it for 2025 budget conversation. It's always nice when it's absolutely silent in the room, sort of thing.
How often do we have an unexpected surplus in general operating funds? Is that?
Well, again, unfortunately, I've only been here for
Yeah.
a year. We certainly had an unexpected surplus last year.
Yeah.
That allowed us to put that money into that reserve. Now we're kind of for the bridge, for example, right? And that was one of those things where even budgeting, who knew that interest rates for the deposits we have would go up as high as they did, right? And in fact, even for me, that they continue to go up this year as high as they have. That's an area where I see that could be a place on the reserves. Now, not only did we notice even what I budgeted for in the reserves for both water and sewer are higher than what we planned for. Our general operating reserve, I think, is going to have the benefit of higher interest rates than what we expected and what I budgeted. So that would be one. Also know that there's always places where you don't have a position filled staffing wise. Obviously, that's one of the things that we have been seeing from RCMP, not being at the rate of what they should be at, I guess, if that makes any sense to you. And therefore that unintended consequences is a bit of a reserve. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
And for me, what's hard is that when I look back on the statements, it's very difficult because of the way that they are presented to kind of get a sense on how things like that, if there was a surplus, where it went and that sort of thing. I mean, I know now from the last couple of years, I can see very clearly like what numbers change because I understand it because I'm doing the numbers now. So I can see places where it's like, oh yeah, we've got some benefit here of I can getting a pattern of here's what we budgeted, here's where the numbers are, here's the surplus of it.
Okay, well, looks pretty quiet out there. Is there any other questions or comments for today? No, okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, Ben, I appreciate your input and your help with getting this going.
No problem.
Explanations on things.
No problem, Sandy.
If
Do you need
it
to
helps,
anything here?
we've already dealt with 16 water main breaks this year.
Do you need to do
So
anything?
it's not even
Just
the peak season yet, so when the
Think we're
cold
gonna
snap
adjourn, but-
happens,
Yeah.
that's when it happens.
But we're
Just like that.
we can
So
abandon here.
I guess that question is in regards to the water main,
Unless
But it's
they-
all on the
like
agenda.
at
Okay.
2.1 million for water main replacements. That's even for 2025, that's conservative. If we've already, we've done 16 this year.
Some of those will be on repairs and maintenance in the operation budget. This would be a plan to say, what will usually happen is when you get that water master plan, it will say, you've got, and then part of the work that Ben and his team does is says, when we noted out the years, it will be a type of metal or that is being used. And then they'll say, these areas are concerned, you're having multiple blowouts. You need to do these kilometers of this first. And then hopefully that brings down your repairs and maintenance costs, which again can help out with, again, if we do less of that, then that feeds into putting more money towards your capital out of your net operating.
For example, when that water main went up on Birch.
Yeah.
Right, it was like, what, 48 hours of
Yeah, frozen
overnight.
frost, extreme cold.
So that would have a major impact on our operations because of wages and.
Absolutely. You got it. The breaks never seem to happen during the day. T-shirt, it's always late, so.
Or a long week.
Or a long weekend, yeah.
Okay, so if I could get someone to, call for adjournment. Council Benson, Council Martin, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thanks, everyone.